Good day and welcome. This is Newsmakers, a show where the Rock County Civics Academy brings into our studio for conversation people who are making the news in our community. And today it's my pleasure to welcome into the studio Claire Gray. She is the Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Forward Janesville. Claire, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here.
Yeah.
One of the big topics that has been a concern in the community for a long time happens to be the arena of child care.
Yes.
It's a challenge. One, it's hard to find, and it's very expensive, and it's a huge need. Forward Janesville decided to take this on as a strategic initiative, and now you've got a new product that's out there in response to that. Tell us about the product first.
Yes. So we launched our child care directory last week. It is a one-stop resource for child care providers, licensed child care providers in Rock County. It's a wonderful, easy-to-use resource that provides location information, hours of operation, types of care provided, and these are all elements that we found care seekers were looking for. On top of that, we found that a lot of them, when they were looking for childcare, were just having trouble even locating it. So it was a simple solve that came out of our childcare work group, which is a work group that is under our Government Relations Council. And we're excited for it to be a community resource, something for care seekers, something that employers could use, and also a great marketing tool for our providers.
I want to get to how this was identified strategically as being an important initiative and just how and what Forward Janesville did to get you to this stage where you're introducing this new product into the marketplace. Take us back to the beginning. How did you come to a determination that childcare actually was an important issue? When you look across the board, there's a lot of important issues in the community.
Yeah. So our Government Relations Council is comprised of about 20 to 25 Forward Janesville members. A lot of them are representative to our business base, and they've been meeting for at least 2 decades. We've had membership changes, but their focus was kind of identifying pressing community issues to the business community and exploring them. So a couple years ago, when I started working with the Government Relations Council, we had moved away from doing a lot of government level advocacy for projects. I mean, one of the biggest GRC projects was, advocating for the I-39-90 expansion. So once that project had wrapped up, the question was, what's next? And there were a lot of local issues that business leaders felt like that there needed to be some focus on. So the Government Relations Council really started to take more of a topical, localized focus, and childcare just kept coming up anecdotally. It kept coming up in conversations, and this was honestly coming out of the pandemic as well. I mean, during the pandemic, it was acutely aware. People were acutely aware that childcare was a challenge, plus people were at home trying to work, trying to care for their own children. And at that time, Forward Janesville had done some work with employers on what was the childcare need. And coming out of the pandemic, it still remained an issue. So our Government Relations Council was like, what does that mean locally? So we identified it as a policy priority area. We convened a work group, and the goal of the work group was really to answer that question. What does it mean locally? How many providers do we have? What do the providers look like? Are they licensed? Are they certified? How many children are they taking care of? What about the unlicensed providers? Is that really a big source of childcare? What are the childcare needs of employees? Are they just daycare? Do they need wrap care? Are we talking about drop-in care? So all these things were on the table.
As you went through this cycle and process of trying to identify need, did you come to any particular conclusions as to the general overall availability of accessible childcare within the community? Do we have an abundance? Do we have a shortage? And what are some of the reasons why?
Well, when you're talking about childcare, you have 2 main groups, right? You have the licensed providers and the unlicensed providers. Licensed providers are ones that are operating under the guise of the state of Wisconsin. Yes, that gives them access to resources, but it also provides us with tracking. We don't know a lot of the unlicensed providers, and unlicensed providers typically don't need to engage with the state because they're only taking care of 1 or 2, maybe up to 4 kids. Licensed providers are taking care of anywhere from 8 to 50 kids, you know? So we had that kind of problem. We could identify that we had a certain slot gap here in the Janesville area. Just for data clarity, we focused on Janesville, but we really didn't know if that was indicative of total gap or total need. We did find, when comparing licensed provider statistics here in Janesville to Rock County, that the childcare need in Janesville was less acute than elsewhere in Rock County, because those statistics are available at the state level and through WICA. So yes, childcare in Janesville was a challenge to find, but actually in other Rock County communities it was a lot harder to find, which is corroborated through the anecdotal evidence. I mean, there just aren't a lot of providers in Beloit, and then you look at the smaller communities. You know, Rock County is a fairly rural community, and we know that the childcare shortage is most acute in rural communities.
If you turned the clock back, not that many years ago, back when General Motors was still operating their facility here in town, there was a consortium of local employers that actually put together a child care facility, an organization called Just in Time for Kids, that operated for a number of years up until that point in time where the partner, one of the partners, General Motors, decided to close their operation, and that changed the community's profile to a degree. Do we have in this community any employer-sponsored child care facilities, or is that something that employers have chosen not to involve themselves?
In our research, we didn't find any employer-sponsored child care centers, no.
Okay. Because that seems to be a common approach to trying, for larger employers at least, to accommodate those particular needs. I think, for example, I go as far as Ford Healthcare in Fort Atkinson. They have a very extensive employee child care facility that the healthcare system sponsors. And that's a different set of circumstances, a different community. When you started exploring the availability of child care, did you get into the issue of affordability of child care?
Yeah, that came up. I mean, we did a survey with Janesville, Milton area employers. It was about 26 employers that participated that were partners in sending out our child care survey to the employees. So we got the child care seeker, we got the family, we got the parent perspective. It was an anonymous survey. We had about 230 some respondents, 234 to be exact. And we heard that there are not enough quality, affordable child care providers. Now, affordability changes depending on your wages, correct? So about the average cost of infant care here is about $6.60 an hour. The average cost of toddler care is about $5 an hour. And we were hearing people saying, even $200 a week is challenging for me, which is $5 an hour. So we did get into affordability. What was interesting in our survey, though, is irrespective of the ability to pay, everybody identified what they were looking for in terms of quality and reputation and location and cost as the same across all abilities to pay. So I think everybody defines childcare as early childhood learning, important for development, not just babysitting, but not everybody has the ability to pay more than $5 an hour.
When you do a survey of that nature, trying to determine in the marketplace what is available and where it might be and its costs, you have to come to some conclusions about various ways to address the gaps that exist. The child care directory is one way of connecting people in need with the existing providers. Was there any focus or any consideration given for the long term to see if there's other means by which you can improve accessibility and perhaps improve the capacity out there?
We talked about, would there be interest in a consortium, for example, that would establish a child care center? That is more of, a bigger, longer term solve, and you have to put that also in the context of many capital campaigns going around. This would be another capital expenditure, another capital campaign. So we looked at that and there wasn't a lot of desire. But on top of that, you're also dealing with a challenging state level environment where potential legislation that would have established an employer tax credit that would have given up to $100,000 to an employer in a tax credit if they invested in a child care center. That's still in limbo. So I think that there are some things when you look at bigger solves that are challenging or longer term solves.
Longer term.
Yep.
Do they remain as a priority for your Government Relations Council and Forward Janesville to look for those long-term solves, or are you moving on to other issues now?
Right now, we're trying to wrap up our focus on childcare. It's been identified as a policy priority area again this year. We launched the child care directory. We have a couple of other pieces that we'd like to put in place. We are convening the providers in a provider network, but any additional focus on childcare would be determined when we reevaluate what the policy priority areas would be for next year.
Your Government Relations Council has been around for a couple of decades. They've covered a lot of territory in a couple of decades. They've addressed this particular priority area that was set by the Forward Janesville Board. What's their next task? Where are you going to take the Forward Janesville Government Relations Council next in terms of addressing priorities in the future?
Well, we have our 6 policy priority areas defined for this program year.
Okay.
So Forward Janesville runs on a program year versus a fiscal year. Our fiscal year is March to February, so we don't run on a calendar year. So right now we have Centennial Park, civic engagement, child care, housing development, workforce diversification, and zoning as our policy priority areas. They're on our website. So our plate is pretty full with the areas that we're focusing on.
Okay. Let's kind of walk in the time we've got left relatively quickly through those areas. Are there particular initiatives that you are in the works of planning for each of those policy areas, or are you still in the let's study phase?
We're in the let's study phase for a lot of those.
Because as you think about it, in the community as dynamic as Janesville, these issues come to the table rather quickly, and the challenge needs to be met rather quickly at a variety of different levels. And making them a priority infers that you're going to take them on and can come forward with some ideas on potential solutions going forward. So to see something coming out in the child care arena is encouraging. It's a good beginning. I'm going to be interested to see progress on the other policy areas, because I'm sure that your policymakers are interested in that progress. Yeah. So what's the game plan going forward?
For childcare?
For child care and for the Government Relations Council.
Well, the Government Relations Council right now has been focusing on a lot of local issues, and we're doing that through a topical approach through the policy priority areas. So that's the game plan for the foreseeable future. We have our policy priority areas. We have work groups organized around each of those. Out of those work groups, after the assessment and study phase, comes suggested solves or suggested initiatives. And so it's really just kind of an ever-evolving process.
And if I were to name the top 2 local evolving issues that you're focusing on, what would those top 2 issues be?
Well, I think housing is top of mind for everybody. Everybody's also excited about Centennial Park and moving that project forward,
Both are one is longer term than the other, but both are critically needed. It's been suggested that the community is probably ripe for a housing summit. Have you discussed that as a possible way to begin addressing in a visible form the housing crisis that we face?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great idea to convene local leaders and various stakeholders. So a housing summit might be what's next for the community.
That would be a great one for the city and Forward Janesville to partner on going forward, would it not?
It would, and don't forget the zoning rewrite that's happening.
That's part of the mix.
That is part of the mix, and that's something that we're excited to see in our community. I mean, the city has outlined their timeline. They have a great website of resources, and that's something that we're digging into and that we're supporting, because the zoning code can really unlock a lot of housing value. There
is a great deal of potential there. It's time to address some of these issues head on and get us to that implementation phase when we have the plans. And it's interesting to watch what goes on in other communities. In the housing arena, for example, you see a lot of progress right now. And a lot of us are anxious to see something moving here in Janesville as well. Thank you, Claire, for your time. Always great to get brought up to date on what's going on with Forward Janesville and in the world of the Government Relations Council. My guest, Claire Gray, she is the Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives with the Forward Janesville, the private economic development and Chamber of Commerce organization here in the greater Janesville community. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich.
That's Newsmakers for this time around. Stay tuned because we'll have a surprise guest or two along the way to keep you apprised of what's going on in our community. Thanks.